If irony had a favorite joke, it was me. The vampire who ran a coffee shop in a sleepy American town where no one suspected the truth. And if fate had a cruel sense of humor, it was him. The hunter who walked through my door on a rainy night, looking for warmth and finding me instead. The first time I saw him, he looked like trouble, handsome trouble, the kind that smelled like gunpowder and secrets. His leather jacket dripped with rain, his boots heavy on my wooden floor, his eyes scanning my cafe like he could see every hidden thing about me. I knew right away he wasn't just another passing customer. Hunters always had that look, like they belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. But he ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and watched me like I was the strangest thing in the room, which technically I was. I had been running the cafe for nearly 5 years, blending into this small town like any other hardworking business owner. No one knew that beneath the scent of espresso and cinnamon scones was the faint pulse of immortality. No one except Heimer, at least that was my fear. Rough night? I asked because silence with him staring was unbearable. He smirked, the kind of smirk that carried both arrogance and loneliness. You could say that. This town is quieter than I expected. Quieter is better, I replied smoothly, hiding the way his presence made my skin prickle. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. You believe that? And that was when I realized. This man was not going to leave me alone. The hunter's name was Evan. He didn't offer it at first, but when he finally did, it rolled off his tongue like a confession he'd rather not make. I wanted to laugh because how cliché was it for a hunter to have a name that sounded like it belonged in some tragic ballad. But laughter died in my throat when he looked at me with those piercing eyes, as if he was daring me to underestimate him. Evan became a regular. Every evening he sat in the same corner, nursing his coffee, sometimes reading, sometimes just staring out the window as if waiting for something or someone. People in town noticed, of course. A new face always stirred gossip, especially one as magnetic as his. But no one guessed the truth, not even for a second. Only I knew what he was, and only he suspected what I was. The tension between us grew like an unspoken secret, thick in the air every time he walked in. Our conversations were simple, almost mundane on the surface, about weather, books, small-town boredom, but beneath every word, a dangerous current hummed. "Don't you ever get tired of this place?" he asked one night, leaning across the counter with an intensity that made my heart stumble. Tired? I raised a brow. Of making coffee? Of seeing the same faces every day? He nodded. Of pretending this is enough. The truth he didn't know was that for me, it wasn't just enough, it was survival. But I couldn't tell him that, not without risking everything. So I smiled, offering him a refill. "You'd be surprised," I said softly. "Sometimes, ordinary is the only thing keeping a person sane." His eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. Maybe you're right, but fate doesn't let things stay quiet for long. One night, after closing, I caught Evan lingering outside, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp, clipped, nothing like the casual banter he used with me. "No, nothing yet," he muttered. "But I can feel it. He's here, somewhere in this town." My blood went cold. He wasn't just passing through. He was hunting, and whether he realized it yet or not, I was his prey. The next morning I should have run. I should have packed up everything and disappeared like mist at dawn. But I didn't. Something kept me tethered to this town, to the cafe, to him. Maybe it was foolishness. Maybe it was desire. Or maybe it was because I had seen the flicker of loneliness in Evan's eyes, the same loneliness that had haunted me for centuries. And so, instead of fleeing, I brewed my coffee, wiped down my tables, and waited for him to walk through that door again. When he did, the air shifted. This time, his smile was softer, his gaze less guarded. He sat at the counter instead of the corner, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of leather and smoke on him. "Can I ask you something?" he said suddenly. "Depends on what it is." He leaned in, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Why do you always look like you're hiding something?" I froze. For a heartbeat too long, I forgot how to breathe. But centuries of practice kept my face calm, my tone light. Aren't we all hiding something? I countered. Evan's lips twitched, as if he wanted to smile but couldn't quite let himself. Maybe. But you feel different. His words struck deeper than they should have. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, "And what if I am?" For the first time, his mask cracked. His eyes softened, filled with something I couldn't name, something dangerously close to longing. "I don't think I'd mind," he murmured. And that was the moment I knew. The line between hunter and hunted was already blurring. The first shot rang out in the middle of the night. Glass shattered, alarms blared, and I tasted the iron tang of blood before I even saw where it came from. Evan stood in the wreckage of my cafe, gun drawn, his expression torn between duty and something softer, something that looked a lot like regret. "Don't move," he said. His voice cracked on the command. I didn't move, couldn't. The air between us was heavier than the gun in his hand. "You knew," I whispered, stepping closer despite the danger. "All this time you knew what I was." Evan's jaw tightened. "I suspected, but I needed to be sure. And now," my voice trembled, betraying more than I wanted it to. His eyes burned with conflict. "Now I wish I wasn't." The hunter in him screamed to finish what he started. The man in him, the one who sat by my window night after night, the one who looked at me like I wasn't just a monster hiding in plain sight, hesitated. "I should end this," he muttered, raising the gun a fraction higher. "Then do it," I challenged, my voice breaking under the weight of centuries of loneliness. "If I'm just another target to you, then pull the trigger." Silence. The rain outside beat against the broken glass like a drum, echoing the racing of my heart. And then, slowly, impossibly, he lowered the weapon. "Damn it," Evan breathed, his shoulders collapsing under invisible weight. "I can't." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something rawer, something carved out of pain and choice. For the first time, I saw Evan not as a hunter, not as an enemy, but as a man at war with himself. And in his surrender, I felt something inside me crack open too. "You're a fool," I whispered, my throat tight. "Yeah," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "But so are you, because you're still here." We cleaned the cafe together that night. The broken glass, the spilled blood, the silence between use it all became part of something we didn't yet have a name for. Every movement was tentative, careful, as if we were afraid one wrong word would shatter the fragile truce we had made. But there was also an intimacy in the quiet, a kind of closeness born not of trust, but of the choice to try. When our hands brushed, it wasn't an accident. When our eyes met, neither of us looked away. And when he finally leaned in, hesitant but desperate, the kiss tasted like defiance and salvation all at once. The weeks that followed were not easy. Hunters do not simply stop hunting, and vampires do not simply forget centuries of survival. We argued. We doubted. We tested the limits of our fragile bond, sometimes breaking it, sometimes mending it again. But in every fight, in every reconciliation, something deeper grew. Something neither of us could fight, no matter how hard we tried. One night, sitting on the steps of my rebuilt cafe, Evan said it first. "I don't know how to stop wanting you," he admitted, his voice raw. "You're not supposed to," I replied softly. "Neither am I." Love between a hunter and a vampire was reckless. It was dangerous. It was doomed according to every rule either of us had ever lived by. And yet it was real. In the way he reached for my hand when he thought no one was looking. In the way I brewed his coffee exactly how he liked it, even when he never asked. In the way silence between us became comfort, not distance. The town whispered about us, of course. They saw the way we gravitated toward each other, the way our eyes lingered too long, the way we seemed inseparable. But no one guessed the truth. To them, we were just two men finding companionship in a lonely place. If only they knew how much more it was than that. The breaking point came when another hunter arrived. He walked into my cafe with the same sharp eyes and steady stance Evan once had. And when his gaze landed on me, I knew. He saw through my disguise in an instant. Evan stiffened beside me, For the first time, he stood not as my enemy, but as my shield. "This one's mine," Evan told him firmly, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, not against me, but for me. The hunter sneered. "Yours? You're compromised." "Maybe," Evan admitted. His voice carried no shame, only conviction. "But I choose him." I don't remember the fight in full, only flashes of steel, the sting of near death, the sound of Evan's voice calling my name like it mattered more than his own life. When it ended, the other hunter was gone, driven away not by my power, but by Evan's defiance. And in the aftermath, as we stood bruised and bleeding under the broken neon sign of my cafe, I realized we had crossed a point of no return. We were no longer hunter and vampire. We were no longer enemies. We were something else entirely. Evan pressed his forehead against mine, his breath ragged, his voice shaking. "I don't care what you are. I don't care what that means for me. I'm not letting go." For centuries, I had hidden in the shadows, surviving but never living. And in that moment, with his words wrapping around me like a vow, I understood what it meant to finally be seen. "You're going to ruin yourself?" I whispered, though my hands clung to him anyway. "Then let me," he said, "because loving you is the only thing that's ever made me feel whole." And so we chose each other, day by day, fight by fight, kiss by kiss. The cafe became more than a place to hide, it became a home. For him, for me, for us. The hunter and the vampire, the man and the monster, no longer bound by what the world said we should be, but by what we chose to become. Sometimes, late at night, when the shop was quiet and the air smelled of coffee and rain, Evan would rest his head on my shoulder and whisper, almost in disbelief, "I never thought I'd find this." And I would smile, pressing a kiss to his hair. Neither did I. Our story was not perfect. It was scarred, complicated, impossible by all accounts. But it was ours. And in a world where love was rare, where choices came at a cost, we learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was also the most beautiful. Love. And we did. We loved until the shadows no longer frightened us. We loved until the labels of hunter and vampire lost their meaning. We loved until ordinary became extraordinary, simply because it was shared. Because in the end, the truth was simple. He was the hunter who chose not to kill. I was the vampire who chose not to run. And together we chose love. Forever. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.